And it looks like we are live.
All right.
We're
No,
back after a giant Scratchcast hiatus.
no theme music to go with it, but you have your host and your recurring guest host who can't seem to get past the simple part stage of a Super Nintendo game.
At least we have Castlevania music in the background, which sounds like some kind of crazy circus setting right now.
Yes, anything involving Medusa heads is going to be crazy, and by crazy I mean irritating.
Crazy is also an ableist term.
But that's okay. This whole game is ableist. Or maybe it's not because of the weird jumping physics.
I should probably put the link out. I don't know if my connection decided. Oh, it did, but let me refresh here. Oh man, I hope. Wow, I don't know why, but my audio sounds terrible listening to the actual playback of the stream.
Must have that Brave Fencer Musashi going on.
It sounds like I'm listening to it through a I don't know, underwater or something like that, or through a doorway or a hallway. Just I'm not sure what that is, but I guess it's probably the maybe it's just the Hangouts connection or something.
Yeah, because I'm not hearing anything off. But
I guess now people can talk about how they're listening to some prepubescent guy on the internet.
hmm, something they were going to do already. Sure.
So I guess for the first topic of the evening, were you aware that tabletop gaming has a white male terrorism problem?
I did not, but I am always curious to know more about terrorism so I can do my part to stop it.
All right, let me pull up this post on the screen here. Present to everyone, and there we go. Of course, this is something that has been posted on Tumblr.
Well, I would add though that right now I am doing my part to fight terrorism as I kill all kinds of evil beasts and creatures.
I
But
suppose
I'm playing as a white man, so you can imagine that's problematic in some way.
it's the white savior or something like that. I think that's what they call it.
Well, they're the only ones that contribute anything, so it's completely justified.
I see. Um, this is actually a pretty long post, but the gist of it is this woman talks about her experience with white men in tabletop gaming, as the title says, and it's just a long list of all the harassment that she has supposedly encountered in her time in the gaming community. And some of it just sounds so stereotypical that I almost I feel very skeptical about it. I know that's wrong because you have to sit back and believe whenever a woman says that she's being harassed. But if you take every Tumblr post serious that complains about harassment, which can just pretty much lead to that guy complimented me or that guy stared at me,
Yeah.
any situation is harassment. So one of the examples is she walks into a game store at the age of 13 for the first time. Uh, she examines a selection of dice and takes them to the counter to pay. How old are you? Asks the balding middle-aged man behind the counter, because of course he would be a balding middle-aged man. I'm surprised she didn't throw white in there, but that's just to be assumed. So she says 13, and then the response is old enough to bleed, old enough to breed. He chuckles in glee. And apparently she ran.
Uh,
that to me just sounds like one of those lines that it's a joke that's out there that I've heard before, but that nobody actually says in reality as a serious statement.
Certainly not a retail store owner speaking to a 13-year-old.
I mean, if they did, they would be in trouble, but there's always some reason of why they can't tell the police or some nonsense like that. And so she, right off the bat there, she says, make no mistake that this is terrorism. The men who email me rape threats have a vested interest in anyone perceived as lesser being expelled from the community, and the tragic thing is that it works. I just don't like the way that it paints every single, now regardless of whether it said white male, black male, purple male, it doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that she's taking her bad experiences, will even give her the benefit of the doubt and say they're true, and she's generalizing the entirety of a group of people.
Because there's nothing at all that could be erroneous about that type of attitude.
Considering it's the exact type of attitude that these types of people will speak out against when it comes to women or the quote-unquote minority groups that they like to talk about without actually seemingly having any real experience or stake in the matter. It's more like a typical talking point to seem like the most progressive person and stand on a high ground and call everybody else a bigot.
Well, it's kind of like that whole what is that hashtag campaign that's been going around today? Resist capitalism, and the people that are using the hashtag are tweeting it from, or they're using Twitter first of all, which is a company that exists purely to make a profit, or that's what businesses used to be about doing until Silicon Valley started spreading cancer everywhere. And they tweet it from their iPhone, which certainly is a business all about making profit, as evidenced by the fact that it is profitable for whatever reason. While they're spending money and probably at Starbucks or something, which is another business, and they're talking about the ills of capitalism.
I actually did not hear about that hashtag, but then again, I haven't paid much attention to Twitter today, except to get into an argument with the person that wrote the article, or post, I should say, because it's hardly an article, that cited this Tumblr post as a source.
The companion piece, if you will.
The We're All Gamers Together, Why Harassment Has to Stop, by Christopher Bearded Fat Fuck Helton. And yes, I know, I'm being insulting, but he was a dick to me for absolutely no reason, so sucks for him. So basically, I saw this post on Reddit, and yeah, it's a crappy website. I probably shouldn't frequent it, but all I was really doing was taking my typical rounds through the Dungeons and Dragons subreddit, and a particular poster there who I've noticed has a tendency to blame things on Gamergate that are completely unrelated, posted the link to this article, so I knew we were in for a fun comment section the moment I saw that. So I read through the article, even though the author claims I didn't, and then I left a reply to this article, but mostly in my response, I was talking about the Tumblr post and the way that I felt it was generalizing far too much. Basically, what I said was that, they're misusing the word terrorism. The post it's an anecdotal post from Tumblr, which is not a reputable site when it comes to these experiences. It spins a narrative. It generalizes based on race and gender in the same way these people don't want that to be done. It claims harassment is only done by, white males in the gaming community. It says that it's towards women and LGBTQ plus however many other letters they've added to that list. And it also, in the article that cites it, they say that we have to, rather than talk about how it's not all men, we have to listen to the people that complain about these things. And I'm not going to say we don't have to listen to them, but you can't take every claim at face value and just trust everybody that comes along. I mean, if that's the case, what's to stop somebody from let's just use the guy that wrote this article for an example. What's to come have somebody stop them, a person, from just saying, hey, this guy raped me, and it's not true, and he is then trapped by his own listen logic.
Especially as an ally, how would he be able to reconcile that happening? Would he sit there and say, oh, well, maybe I did do something that this person could construe as me raping them?
So I was, yeah.
Even though I've never met the person before.
Right. So I was completely calm and collected in this post. I just basically wrote quite bluntly what I thought. Didn't use any offensive language or insults or anything like that. And the first response I get from the person that started the thread was, you subscribe, do you also subscribe to Return of Kings or something like that? And so I said, no, that's a way to make an assumption. He's like, oh, it's not an assumption. It's a question, because you are using the same justifications as the MRAs who try to do for their offensive and aberrant behavior. And I said, Return of Kings isn't even an MRA website. It's just the douchey masculinity blog. But that being said, I wasn't considered an MRA, and that I've called out such behaviors and I don't support them. And he's basically, just trying to be like, oh, because you didn't nod your head in agreement, this is what you are. And then I had other people reply to it. Somebody said I was ignorant because, oh, let's see, what does it say? Oh, this is the most ignorant thing I've seen posted on this subreddit. Real or not, this article provides a good message that should be applied no matter the situation. So, real or not. So if somebody just made this up, we should still talk about it as though it's real. Meanwhile, if somebody is making up these kinds of lies about people, they're doing an actual disservice to the people that have experienced harassment and sexual assault. It's because if somebody comes out and they find out their story is complete bullshit, then it makes people more skeptical of others that come forward and say, hey, maybe this person is lying, when they could very well be telling the truth. I honestly don't see, if you advocate for this sort of thing, how you could reconcile the fact that it harms the actual cases. Let's see. So yeah, then it got into, I just happened to post my exchange on Twitter there, the comments, and then somehow, either through the subreddit or through a Twitter search, the author of the article found me and just said, honestly, I figured there would be a worse reaction to my piece, making it sound as though, sure, I gave it some backlash, but nothing too noteworthy. He expected, I guess, outright bigotry or something in response. So I told him that I don't condone harassment no matter who it's aimed at, but I felt that the Tumblr post generalized too much. And I mean, you guys can go through and check my Twitter account and read through the exchange if you want, just to see that I'm not misrepresenting. But basically, he started off nice at first, and then as soon as I said that the Tumblr post may be an exaggeration and it might not be good to take it at face value, and that it misused the word terrorism and stuff, and he's like, oh, this is just semantics because these women are scared. That makes it terrorism. We don't get to define their experiences. It's like, no, the terminology gets to define the experience. Like, we have words, they have a meaning, use them properly. Then he tries to accuse me of not reading his piece because he claims he cited multiple cases. He only cited one lawsuit, and I would say that lawsuit is hardly the precedent setter that they claimed it was. Then he goes on to say that once again, I didn't read the article. He had a number of women report incidents, but they're all anonymous. There's nobody that stood up and said, hey, this is me, this is what happened to me, and I'm standing up against it, because apparently they're just afraid of more harassment and their careers being damaged. But if they're already going through the harassment and they're still getting it, regardless of whether they're anonymous talking about their experiences or not, I really don't see the problem with coming forward. Because at least if you come forward, you have the chance of stopping it. And then he tried to spin it as, oh, this isn't about your hurt feelings or thinking you're oppressed. Which, by the way, he said you're instead of you are oppressed. This is about bad things happening to women. So nowhere in any of my responses did I mention my feelings or anything of the sort. And that's the second person that tried to make the response I gave about my personal feelings.
Once again, contributing to the studies that are showing that all that online debates do is, especially politically charged ones, do is further divide and polarize people by their opinions, and then therefore any discourse online turns into either you are, I need to antagonize you, or you are an ally, as they like to say.
I guess the thing that bugs me most about situations like this is that I'm not somebody that has that supports harassment or takes part in it. I've never treated a woman as lesser or made her feel as though she needed to be afraid of me or something of that nature due to sexual advances. In fact, I've probably been too kind in that area. So it's actually pretty amazing to me to have people throw those accusations my way just because I said something that doesn't align with what they're trying to spin. Because I absolutely believe that people go through some fucked up things and hear, disgusting things from guys because I've heard it firsthand. But to take those few experiences and then try to paint a picture of a community overall just seems wrong. And nobody ever addressed when I brought up the argument, okay, so you're excusing this for women because they say they're afraid. So does that mean that you excuse the racist diatribes from the people that claim they're just afraid of black people? I mean, does that justify their fear and their hatred?
Which, of course, it to no surprise, or to the surprise of the millisecond, generated plenty of downvotes. And I don't think there was any response to it. It was just, oh, I don't like this.
No, nobody addressed it. And I suppose that leads into the next topic, since I experienced it throughout this exchange. Although my posts have since recovered, since I suppose people that actually decided to read what I said came through. But the downvote system on Reddit, and I guess in a little bit in a way on YouTube, kind of bugged me. Not because my posts are being downvoted and it hurts my feelings or something like that. I mean, I've had people say much worse to me online than just clicking a dislike button, so that's never going to matter. But it's the fact that it allows people to avoid interacting and clarifying what it is that they don't like. Instead, it's just like, I'm going to label this as bad because I don't like it, but I'm not going to give anybody else any reason around me as to why it's bad. And people have got so caught up in these social media trends that they will actually look at something and they'll look at the downvotes, they'll look at the dislikes, and they'll think based on that, this is actually terrible, when it could very well just be people are stupid and they're just clicking it because they don't agree.
Right. It turns into the court of public opinion, basically. And even though this isn't directly tied to it, I know I've mentioned before, there's a network of websites that operate in the same karma system, or what they call gamification, which I'm totally against. If anybody's curious, the gamification of anything, but what there's a network of websites called Stack Exchange, which I detest in every way possible, and they have implemented the same system, and they have made a point to say if you're going to downvote somebody's question or comment or answer, that you provide an explanation for it. And if you go there, you will never struggle to find at least one where somebody says, can you tell me why you downvoted this? And it can be a fairly innocuous question and it be downvoted. But here's the problem, and here's really the paradox of this whole gamification system. In a website like that, where your it now especially it started to affect your ability to progress your career depending on what network you use, that can have an adverse effect on your ability to progress in your career. And the thing about it is that it's completely blind. It doesn't see gender, it doesn't see race, it doesn't see anything. So as long as you don't fit in with the court of public opinion, or if the mods were feeling particularly douchey that day, which they usually are because they spend way too much time with their bottles of Vaseline in their on the toilet and with a Victoria's Secret magazine instead of actually doing any kind of substantive work.
Well, it's the mod power trip.
Exactly. And so if the gamification has a direct effect on your ability to earn a living, I would think that people would take a step back and realize, is it really all that valuable to do it? And I have an article here that I haven't had time to look through that tries to discuss kind of the effects of what they consider to be addiction or online addiction to social media. But I do have another study here that does talk about what the effects are of social media, and at least in the political spectrum, and the results are not great. I mean, I can post it. Hopefully, I can post it on here, but
I can only imagine.
the long running hypothesis of many that all social media has done now is allowed our views to become more polarized. This and from what seems like other studies have essentially validated, or at least given some creed to the likelihood that the hypothesis is true, that it does lead to polarizing. And I'm sure if they're based on how they defined online addiction, the need or coupling that with the need to, I guess, win the right amount of points on an online website can only lead itself to worsening the social situation as it stands today.
I actually don't even think that at that point, if like employers are looking at Stack Exchange accounts and basing that as criteria for hiring processes, if I were in that industry, I wouldn't even bother having an account because that just seems completely ridiculous.
Well, see, that's part of the thing. So in other cases, you would say what I've heard often is they'll say employers are researching you on Facebook and LinkedIn, so don't post any stupid pictures, as sort of a passive thing. If you have it, they'll look at it. The problem with websites like Stack Exchange and possibly to a smaller degree Reddit is that in a lot of cases, every time I've seen it, they blatantly asked for your account profile name so that they can look it up to make sure you're what the community considers a valuable or reputable contributor.
Which is really odd to me because I don't feel like employment and personal life should really mix to that extent. Like, all right, we'll take the case of that Allison Rapp woman with the Nintendo Treehouse. She got what she deserved in the sense that she was mixing her personal Twitter profile with her Nintendo employment and, spinning her narratives, making inappropriate posts and posting photos that were not representative of the image of the company. So in that case, that was wrong of her. If had she a separate account, oh, this one's my personal, this one's my work account, I could see her being able to do those things and still remaining employed. Because I don't feel like your job should have that much of a hold on you as to where you're not even allowed to express yourself freely while you're outside of the workplace.
But the reality of the matter, and what people don't understand, is that employers are fairly explicit about this, and they will say, even in situations where it is a quote unquote personal account, it still has to hold up to whatever their standards are.
Right.
So
So I guess if you accept a job knowing that, I guess you should be willing to conform to that standard.
however, and this goes back to the whole Reddit gamification thing, if you're applying for the nonsensical and non-existent job of social media manager or coordinator at some company, they will expect you to have these social media accounts. So if for some reason you're not active on Reddit, and it's part of an industry that heavily depends on it, that will only lead to them questioning your ability to make posts on social networks.
Because that's the absolute hardest thing in the world to do. Who doesn't know? I mean, aside from people that are still around that are from previous generations, who actually has a difficult time making posts on Facebook or Reddit? It's like the simplest thing in the world. You click your button, your reply button, you write your post, you hit enter. That's all there is to it. This is not exactly challenging work. And to be honest, I'm still shocked that social media manager is even a job title sometimes, just because it seems so ridiculously easy.
Well, it's a glorified marketing position, to be sure, and the reality of the matter is that uh, companies and nonprofit organizations alike really struggle with what they want to post, because you have to consider that they want to have a very heavily curated and very rehearsed and very specific message and narrative that they want to create.
Well, especially now with the way people will see one advertisement or one tweet and they'll either take it out of context or they'll spin it to be about have some deeper political meaning. There was I think it was an Old Navy ad recently where they had to come out and apologize. I think I saw this posted on Jezebel, no surprise, because there were, I think, four girls, little girls in a photo. Three were white, one was black. Two of the white girls on the outside of the lineup were doing some sort of gymnastics poses or something, and then the girls in the center, the white girl had her elbow resting on the black girl's head, and they claimed that this was racist. But if you go to the bottom of the article, somebody in the comment section said, I'm pretty sure that this is just a common trend with Old Navy photographers, because they posted a photo of a prior ad where it was the taller black girl in the photo that had her elbow resting on the head of the white girl. So it has absolutely nothing to do with race, yet they look at that and they say, oh, this is showing that white people have supremacy over blacks to this day. And it's like, come on, man, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous, but that is the reason why they have these social media management positions. Now, whether those people are qualified to do anything or whether they spam or whatever they do is a separate conversation, but they do it. And so the corporations and nonprofits they have a heavily curated message that obviously they screw up at from time to time, or they don't reach the court of public opinion, and in their case they have to make sure that whatever they do fits whatever fits the narrative of popular opinion, or at least their audience's popular opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I would go as far to say that some, there are plenty of companies out there that seem to go above and beyond that to not offend people that aren't even interested in their product. I mean, we've seen that again and again with video games. There was the whole Overwatch controversy recently with the butt pose, which, interestingly enough, they changed the pose, and it's actually technically worse than the one that they removed. I mean, I still don't think it's offensive or wrong or shouldn't be there. I'm just saying that if you look at the two side by side, the replacement pose is a little bit more sexualized than the original. Because in the new pose, it's almost like she's being kind of flirty, and there's even it's like a old pinup girl advertisement that the pose seems to be based on.
And has anybody complained about that yet?
Yes, they did. I'm not sure which side it came from. I mean, I imagine it was the side that wanted the original pose removed simply because it would appear to be worse. But it's kind of curious because it does make me wonder what Blizzard was doing. Were they being, I guess I hate to use this term because I think it's ridiculous, but were they being trolls to the community? Were they saying, we're not going to give in to this ridiculous standard of one person complaining, so they acted like they were going along with removing it, and then instead slipped something in where they could be like, well, we did change it.
I'm not sure. I feel a lot of Western developers, particularly, are way too quick to kowtow to quote unquote liberal sensibilities.
It does seem that way. I honestly don't understand why everyone seems to be so afraid of the backlash, because looking at past examples of numbers, these games have still sold regardless of the people that seem to hate them. I can't remember where I saw the post, but there was that one that proved that the games that Anita goes and endorses don't actually get, for all the views that the YouTube review gets, it doesn't actually have an effect on the sales. Nobody's out there buying this game just because she endorsed it.
Well, I think there are a couple of problems here. One is that corporations are notoriously parsimonious in that they they never want to do anything that rocks the boat. One thing that I find incredibly annoying is when somebody wants to tell me that some corporation like Apple is incredibly innovative for doing something that every business should be doing. But
like customer service.
Right. But what bothers me even more to that point is that they're saying they're innovative when, if push were to come to shove, they would be just as reactive as any other company if something happened. So, and in fact, there were several controversies that they were involved in when the whatever it's called, the iStore, whatever Apple Store, I don't know what it's called. But
yeah,
whatever.
Apple Store, I don't even know.
Yeah, I know the iTunes Store, the App Store is what it's called, and there were a number of controversies there, and some they were willing to give into, and others they weren't. Once again, based on the fact that they felt it would be too risky, as most companies do. That's all they care about are risks. Despite the fact that people, or I've read and taken classes where they say, oh, well, C-level executives are more about strategy and pushing the company forward, and it's really middle managers that care about mitigating risk. No, they all do, because they don't want to do anything that's going to mess up either the shares of the price per share or earnings per share of the company, and they don't want to do anything to affect their beautiful, wondrous profit. So they're not going to do anything to really change things. So what happens is, and what's actually beautiful in the App Store case is the thing that they were getting all up in arms about, I think, was removing something that they thought was LGBT friendly or some crap like that, and they were claiming Apple, I guess, was anti LGBT, and they removed it. And I believe they never put it back on the App Store at all.
It's
And people,
actually interesting to me that a company has to be pro or anti anything when their industry has absolutely nothing to do with that political aspect of society.
because despite what the Logic and Reason Brigade would like to believe, people are heavily dependent. They heavily base things on opinions. The whole idea of sales and marketing is to appeal to your emotion.
Oh, this was the that video we watched, the emotional decisions, or what
Yeah,
was that called? Emotional intelligence or something like that.
yeah,
And basically the premise was that whether you realize it or not, your emotional response to things forms your opinion or view of a business. And the example they gave was service at a restaurant, whereas if you receive crappy service from just one waiter, that will paint your opinion of the entire operation. But so you're sitting there, you're ready to leave, and you're saying, oh, I'm gonna give this place a terrible review on Yelp when I get home. And then this other waiter comes up to you and they're kind to you, and that kind of tells you, oh wait, maybe I've been too hasty here. This person is being nice to me. They're giving me the service that I deserve. Perhaps
whether
it's
you
just the employee and I'll talk to the manager rather than going and painting the entire business as terrible. And I'll come back and I'll give them another try.
right. And I mean, and we can we can use we can use a more personal example. Anybody who knows me in person knows that I am very much not a fan of American Airlines, and those that know me personally know why, or know the specific incident that turned me into very much detesting them. But that decision was largely based on how they made me feel. It was an emotional response. It would make sense to be, oh, I'm just a rational person in this case of American Airlines for a handful of reasons. One, in terms of destinations, they they don't, as an airline on their own, I do not believe they have nearly the amount of destinations that say United Airlines has, particularly international destinations. So, from a logical standpoint, doesn't make much sense to stay with them because they don't go everywhere that other airlines would go, and they don't, and their fleet is not particularly great. But from an emotional standpoint alone, that's usually enough because there are countless people. I have been reading some LinkedIn post somebody made where they basically said they're boycotting American Airlines, and they're just going to go to Southwest like everybody always says they're going to do. And it was purely emotional, and brand, and that's how people view brands, and that's how they sell brands to you. It's this personal connection. It makes you feel a certain way. Even social networks and the like do that.
Which explains why they have to come out in support of personal politics that are popular to appeal to the masses.
Right. They have to make a concerted effort to decide whether or not it's worth it to risk possibly alienating a a certain community, particularly the LGBT community, because the running stereotype, and there is some truth to that stereotype, is that they have a lot more disposable income, and they're more likely to they're certainly likely to purchase their products. So
Right.
they're of course they're going to say, well, no, we are in full support of the community, because they wouldn't want to risk somebody not buying their overpriced aluminum bodied Unix or BSD based garbage, or
Now, I guess there is
BSD based BS. And
the
if anybody else gets the other problem with BSD, or if they don't get it, I'll help them, or I'll remind them that there's some people out there who love BSD and have blue hair.
I guess the counter example to companies that have taken a risk, which I honestly don't think it's too much of a risk, would be PlayAsia when they came out with their whole the post with about triggering and all that nonsense, and then the whole support of Dead or Alive Extreme 3 and telling people that they can still get it through them and whatnot. They found a market and they latched onto it. Whether or not they actually have personal views that strong, or whether they're just doing it to bring in more sales, I don't know. Either way, it seems to have worked, and it was smart on their part. But to me, that's a company that they had the ability to do that because they're basically worldwide, and I don't know how much of their sales actually come from the U.S., but they have. I think that they're located in Hong Kong.
Yes,
So I imagine
the company is located in Hong Kong, and they have warehouses in Singapore and
yeah. So I
Taiwan, I
mean,
think.
so I imagine that they make quite a few sales within Asia as well. So I don't think they really have anything to worry about pissing off a couple of social justice advocates in the U.S.
But when they did that, they knew exactly who they were coming after and who they were targeting. And to be fair, who's more likely to import video games? I mean, that was their big thing, especially back in the day when eBay was not a particularly delightful choice in importing games. A
It's
website like PlayAsia was great. So
yeah,
likely people import games for a number of reasons, and one of the probably the most prominent ones is the game wasn't released in their locale, or the game was censored in their region and they don't want to play a censored game. So they knew who their audience was already, so it was easy for them to do that.
yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's fair.
you're right that they might have angered a few social justice people like Andrew Vestal, who,
Oh, that's the guy with the annoying bird avatar, right?
yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned it on streams before, but I actually have had personal dealings with that guy, dating back to the 90s, if you can believe that. Uh, and so I don't have the most favorable opinion of him.
I think he
But
blocked me for something. I don't
yeah,
remember what it was.
yeah, I think you showed him that PlayAsia was not around at the time he said it was.
Oh, that's right. God forbid you're wrong on the internet.
Yeah, and well, we're not here to talk about why I think that guy is an idiot, or why I have long thought that guy was an idiot. But uh, I mean, it's like you said, everybody knows who their audience. It's no different from media outlets. I mean, Breitbart knows who their audience is, so of course they're going to talk about alt-right nonsense, and Kotaku knows who their audience is. So that's why they talk about the nonsense they talk about. Is it a trashy website? Of course it is. But somebody out there is reading it and making them money. Not much. And whatever money they're making, they're going to lose. But somebody out there is giving them a reason to exist.
Well, they have their reasons.
And this is how companies, going back to the at an individual level, this is how companies try to justify you as an employee should not be saying X, Y, and Z. They say this is your personal brand. Do you want your personal brand to reflect this? And most people are too cowardly to make a brand that can be considered offensive, or they're not in a position where they're really allowed to make a voice anyway. And so their personal brand is another generic brand that you would get from anybody, but at least it triggers the emotional response to the people who are making the hiring decisions that this person is not a loose cannon, which is ultimately it. I can speak on the tech world, but it's not the Zed Shaws and Ted Jubas of the world who are less inclined to care about your opinion on their thoughts on technology, as evidenced by the fact that at least in Ted Juba's case, his older website didn't have a comment section. There was one point where he even said comments are still disabled because I don't care about what you think.
That's actually kind of funny. I
And
know.
I think probably a more prominent example for those that are not in the industry is Maddox. He's never had comments on his website. Does he care about what you think? Not really. In the sense that if he gets hate mail, he can respond directly to it. But
Yeah, that's the thing. People act like if you don't have a comment section, there's no way to reach you or no way to respond to your content, and that's absolutely not true. You have YouTube for one now, where you could just go and make a video about somebody that you don't like and say whatever the hell you want about them. So if they don't have a comment section, all right, you could say, well, maybe they're not willing to listen to what I have to say or some nonsense like that. But you got to remember that he also started his website, what, late 90s?
Yep, 97.
I mean, that was before comment sections were even really a thing on websites.
Right. The only way of really interacting with people were chat rooms like WBS,
Yeah.
showing my age again, and forums.
Right. And then of
and
course
forums weren't even as they were not as proliferated as they are now, because you didn't have freely open source available software that you could just download and set up. I mean, yeah, now with things like Squarespace and Tumblr, it's even easier to make a website without having to know how to, and without understanding the technology. But it was even harder back then because you didn't have any kind of support.
I'm gonna make a bit of a claim, so people might try to call me out on that or get aggravated at it. But I think part of the reason that has to do with comment sections is people like to grandstand, and they like to put their word out there and then have a bunch of other people come along and validate it. If you could argue, oh, Maddox doesn't have a comment section, so he's an idiot that doesn't care what people think. Well, no, you can directly email him and tell him what you think. So you have the opportunity to respond to him directly if you so desire.
Or
the fact that he doesn't have a comment section doesn't negate that. And to me, that just says if you look at that and you don't think that's a legitimate option, you care less about the content of what it is you're trying to say and more about everybody that's going to come along and read what you have to say and pat you on the back for it,
Right, because people still engage him on Twitter and Facebook, but to a certain extent, you will have far fewer people making some kind of negative comment, because they can't risk that if they made a comment and it was idiotic, that one, nobody saw it, and two, that he could reply to it and have complete control. Notwithstanding that most people's pedestrian and ignorant comments are hardly worth caring about in the first place. But it goes back to that thing again of either gamification, a la Reddit and Stack Exchange, or it's like you said, it's about grandstanding. It's the whole addiction thing. I have to make sure everybody sees what I'm saying. I mean, in the early days of Twitter, when I was using it, when you use the retweet function, it was purely to state what somebody else said to possibly an audience of viewers who either were not subscribed to the person or they were not at an event. So it was they didn't use retweeting necessarily at a conference, but if the person had a Twitter account and they were at a conference and they stated something, they would often retweet that. So the way that retweets worked back then, for those that don't remember, don't know, is it was purely to say what somebody else said, and in fact, it wasn't even a function of Twitter back then. It was something that people manually did, and then the third-party Twitter clients that came into fruition much later then started adding it as a feature, and eventually Twitter did themselves. And then now they have finally done the thing that happens now, where if you retweet something, you can still make your post on top of it. And that came from the fact that when people retweeted in the early days of Twitter, if they could afford to make the space, they would usually add their own commentary, especially if it came from a conference. They would add something to let you know, either give you context as to what was going on at the time at the conference, or to add their personal anecdotes, as people love to do. When they started, and you have seen this on your account, but when they started the whole process of when, or the whole feature set of when you now retweet, you can still make your own commentary. I actually saw it beforehand. I didn't get what they were saying when they said retweets do not necessarily mean endorsement. But
Mhm.
now that they do this, I now see what it is. And people now are just using retweets to basically get their audience to oppose somebody else. Once again, going back to uh, the whole polarization. I need to find a way to antagonize you, because this is social media, and we've taken things to a point where you're one of either extreme. And so if you say something I don't like, you are an antagonist. You're an enemy. And I need to find a way to further antagonize you. So let me show my followers what you said, in order to get them to say something about you, or to say something directly to you. People don't address arguments directly that much anymore. They still do at replying and things like that. But I guess this can go into the next part of the topic. A lot of times what happens is similar to what happens in the rare event that I involve myself in a discussion, where they will cowardly and sheepishly cower away under the guise of, oh, you just don't want to listen, or I'm okay. I good. They always leave some stupid salutation, or
I disengage, or
yeah.
I wish you a good life, or something, condescending. That's like, yeah, I'm wishing you well, but I'm also thinking lower of you while I'm doing it.
Right, some feel good commentary, some trite platitude that oh, I wish you well, and whatever you do. No, you don't. You were just arguing and calling somebody an idiot, and saying that they didn't know what they were talking about. And
So
now that you can't argue your way out of this anymore, and you didn't get the support from your followers you were hoping to get, you take the coward's way out, or some, what I've seen happen now is, the minute you make any kind of reply, sometimes if they didn't have one, they just wanted to heckle you for the heck of it, haha. Then the minute you actually fight back, they're like, oh, you're taking it further than I meant it. No, you specifically said something. You made a charged comment.
oh, the guy on Twitter the other day, after I put out the controversial sex robot video, who was like, "Oh, more shaming language. Where have I heard that before?" or something. And then um, I told him shaming language didn't mean anything, and then he's like, "Oh, it's merely an observation," or something like that. And then I kind of went at him and told him to explain his stance or whatever. And then he made, I should probably look it up because I don't even remember, to be honest. I don't want to misrepresent it here. Okay, so what do we got? Um, I hate to put it up on the screen, but I should do it just because it's proof of its existence, I suppose. Okay, so because Zerst liked the video, then I guess this guy must be a follower of his or something, and he says, "Oh, hey, shaming language, haven't heard that before." And I said, "Shaming language, the typical reply for people that want acceptance for their pathetic life choices." He says, "Merely an observation." I said, "If people want to fuck
And
robots,"
what exactly was the observation there?
that it was
Because,
shaming language, I guess.
but it was clearly sarcasm.
Right. I said if people want to fuck robots and plastic dicks, have at it, but don't expect it to be respected. He's like, oh, did I say anything? Oh, right. You're projecting my critique of you trying to shame men into something else. I'm pretty sure I didn't project anything because that's exactly what he was saying. So I said, no, you took the passive approach and bitched out. Your critique is no critique at all. Shaming men meets Jack. He says, I overstated my sarcastic joke by calling it a critique. Doesn't change the fact that you extrapolated a lot. Where did I do that? Because I made, what, 2 comments towards him at that point? And then I said, I replied based off the context you gave me. If you don't like it, perhaps learn to articulate your stance better. Because basically, he just came along, threw in a sarcastic dig, and when I called him out it, he didn't have anything to say. You know, and so I said, shaming men doesn't mean anything because whether it was a man or a woman, I'd still criticize the behavior. And of course, you know, I disengaged and didn't respond.
Right. And people always do like, here are the excuses I'll see. I can't explain, or I'm not good at explaining this in 140 characters. If you're not, then why did you bother even trying to do it?
Right. Couldn't you, if you really want to talk to the person, couldn't you be like, hey, give me a follow so I can DM you, or go to their YouTube channel and look at their damn email address, something to contact them directly so that you can explain your stance if that's really what you want to do. But the problem with that is I don't believe people are sincere in that. They don't want to do that. They want to show their audience that they are the superior person so that they can get pats on the back from their followers. And when it doesn't work out, they just say, oh, well, nobody came to my defense. I'm out of here. And that's the thing that I encountered yesterday, something similar in the comment section of the very same sex robot video. This guy came at me ridiculously hard in the first comment. He was like, oh, you know, you're judgmental, you're a disgusting person, you know, I can't agree with you, you're an SJW, all this other stuff. And it's like, it's all insults. And all he did was throw in there was some little bitty nonsense about where's your evidence, and this your response is not rational. But you know, I took the bait foolishly. I admit that. I shouldn't have. The only thing I should have replied to him with was, you are talking to me about having sex with robots, and that what is rational about that? And that's all I should have said, and I should have left it at that. But instead, you know, I got into the whole wall of text, back and forth for a bunch of responses, and finally he made it sound as though all he ever wanted to do was have a nice discussion. And then when I pointed out the fact that he came into the discussion making insults, which, by the way, I will clarify again, I have no problem with. If somebody wants to call me an idiot, that's perfectly fine, but don't expect me to be above that if that's the way you're coming into the discussion. And that's what bothered me. He's like, oh, you're just being petty by focusing on that. Meanwhile, I replied to everything I said, and then in addition to that, I called him a hypocrite because he's calling me out for making insults when that's the way he started the discussion. But then it ended up where he's backing out and he's saying, oh, you're just not listening to me. You're being unwilling to listen. You're just like the regressive left because you won't admit you're wrong. Well, why would I ever admit I'm wrong if I don't think I'm wrong? I'm sorry that, you know, one random guy on the internet is not going to change my mind without a really good reason for me to do so. And that's that. I guess that's my comment section rant on that. I have no problem engaging with people in discussions, but if you're going to come at it from a disingenuous standpoint right from the get-go, don't expect me to be above making insults or calling you out on your bullshit, because that's exactly what I'm going to do. And if you don't like somebody doing that, perhaps you should come at the discussion from the same standpoint, you know, with the same amount of respect that you would like to be shown, because I will respect you as long as you show me some respect. It's supposed to be mutual. I'm not just going to be nice to somebody because they decided to engage with me. That it makes absolutely no sense. What do we have going on in the chat here? They assume everyone else is an MRA. Yeah, ironically enough, I still get those assumptions, and I hardly ever say anything that would even remotely identify me as such. But then again, I've also been called social justice warrior, so I really don't know where they think I fall on the spectrum. To be honest, it's quite confusing. And I think I seem to have lost my co-host. Hopefully he'll be able to pop back in. I was wondering what happened, but I just checked the Hangout window and I'm now on my own. I think he's coming back. Good old Google Hangouts. You can always count on it to work. But apparently it doesn't want to do that. Apparently I'm too much triggering for everybody, but you know, it's amazing because I really don't think that I've said anything so extreme. The only thing I've really done on YouTube and in my videos is just be honest about my opinions on things, and agree or disagree, whatever you want to do, that's fine with me. But I'm just really tired of people that are disingenuous and want to talk about rationality and evidence and logic and all that nonsense when they don't provide any of their own, or when they come at you with insults and then try to act like you're not being reasonable. You're not even all that offensive even when I disagree with you. I guess I don't know. I seem to touch a nerve with certain people. Like, they really, really don't like it. It's funny because they'll always praise assertiveness and conviction and all that nonsense. But then when I actually show that backbone and they disagree with it, it's suddenly not a good trait to have anymore. I mean, it's either you like those characteristics or you don't. Because in which case it just comes down to, it's okay to listen to as long as you agree with it. And like I said, you know, there's no I have no qualms with civil disagreement. So I don't deter people from coming into my comment section or my chat room or contacting me on Twitter or any of that stuff and try to say, you know, you can't disagree with me, or I'm going to block you, or something stupid like that. I pretty much allow just about anything to be posted. The only thing that I've really ever removed from a comment section is when somebody came along and posted somebody's personal information in a comment. That's it. Because I don't think that's fair to do, no matter how much you hate what the person said. I mean, you can go ahead and you can post that information anywhere else you want, but I'm not going to be an accomplice in it, I suppose. It's really hard to offend me. Yeah, I guess it's hard to offend me because, you know, I feel grounded in my mindset and my opinions. So I'm not too worried if there are people out there that don't like what I think or think I'm a bad person for thinking what I think, because I am confident in the way that I treat people in my personal life. So ultimately it doesn't have any effect on me. And I feel like people put a lot of value into what others say on the internet these days. And I guess it's just a consequence of being so connected to social media and feeling like you need that validation from other people. But, and granted, it's nice to find people that you have things in common with. You know, that's always a nice thing, but I don't think it's necessary to always have somebody nodding in agreement with you, because whether or not your opinion is of the majority, if it's an informed opinion, it doesn't matter how many other people agree or disagree with it. You know, what matters is that you are confident in your own mindset and your own opinions. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be willing to change or adapt them upon learning new information, but you also shouldn't falter to the first person that comes along and says, well, you know, you're wrong and you're a disgusting person if you think this. For me, it's going to take just a little bit more convincing than that, especially if that's the first way that, you know, that they're going to come at me about it. Because, you know, contrary to what most people think these days. If you engage with someone in a civil manner, you have a much better chance of them taking into account your words and listening to what you have to say, and perhaps even saying, you know, even though I disagree with you, you do have some valid points or something of that nature. And I actually encountered that yesterday on an old video that I had. Somebody came back and left a comment on it. I guess they saw it for the first time. And he was talking about the tech industry and the women in tech and the hashtag it was never a dress campaign. And he was saying how he thought it was a good idea and that the company was sincere. And I said, you know, look, they might be sincere, but I don't think that changing a bathroom sign does anything to address issues that women may be having in the tech industry, you know? And so we had a little bit of a civil discussion based off of that, and it went pretty well for the most part. That's one of the few, oh, I'm getting contacted by my co-host here. He says, is something wrong with the Hangout? Well, can you guys hear me okay? Because apparently he's just getting kicked or something. I'll try to send him the link again and see what happens. Hopefully I don't have to shut it down, because that would be quite obnoxious. But basically, in my ramble here, ultimately what I was trying to say is that if you show a person that you are, you know, you're coming at it respectfully and you're willing to talk and not just come in there and be like, ah, oh, you're a piece of shit, you're this, you're that. Granted, sometimes that can be entertaining, but for the most part, if you really want to get your message through and you're really looking to have a discourse and communicate about an issue openly, then you need to realize that the best way to do that is to try to be as respectful as possible, which I'm completely willing to do until somebody says something to me that is insulting or nonsense. Because while I may not be offended by it, I'm not going to sit around and just let somebody dog on me for no reason. Trying to summon the co-host back in, but apparently it's giving us problems. Let me just shoot him a message here. Okay. I mean, I see him there on the window, but he's not able to enter. Good old Google Hangouts, ruining the show for the first time back in months. Basically, I haven't ironed out the details yet, but we're either going to do this bi-weekly or monthly. Being polite is a faggy virtue. Okay. Well, I mean, if you're not just joking around, I honestly don't see how that will ever really do anything productive in a conversation or actually change somebody's mind about something that you're trying to communicate with them. Still trying to fix technical difficulties. Oh, Google. I mean, I suppose if all you're trying to do is argue on the internet, there's no sense in being polite. But if you're actually trying to... now it says he's not allowed back in. Let's see what I can do to fix that. Oh, come on. Yeah, ridicule and scolding can help people realize how stupid they are being. Rarely have I seen that happen, though. Most people just double down and get pissed off that you're insulting them. I mean, at least that's been my experience. I don't think I've ever called somebody stupid and they said, hey, you know what, I'm actually being stupid. Maybe they changed something after they left the discussion and I never knew about it, but they didn't admit it to me at the very least. But I think part of that is a consequence of people arguing on the internet just to be right. So very rarely will you have somebody come along and say, hey, I'm wrong. Okay, I really don't know how to fix this because apparently it says that he's not allowed back in the room. And I don't see anything that says that he's banned or anything of the sort, so that's a problem. Unfortunately, if it doesn't work, may have to cut it short here. It's only been about an hour, though. I was hoping to do at least an hour and a half. And this is just a little bit ridiculous. I should have used OBS, probably. Yeah, this is the show's been going on for a while, and now we're at the technical difficulty portion of the show because I've lost my co-host and can't seem to pull him back in. For whatever reason, Google Hangouts doesn't want to allow him back in the room. Just trying to let him know via Skype. I suppose this is my fault for not using OBS. The only thing about OBS that I don't like using is that you don't get to see who is talking. Like, I like the way Google Hangouts will show your icon, I guess. Yeah, I guess I could start a new one. It's just kind of dumb because I only plan on going for maybe 20 minutes to a half hour longer, so I hate having to do this in parts, but I guess if there's no choice, then that's what I'll have to do. All right. I will try to restart the Hangout. So I'm going to cut it here, and I will come back. Maybe I'll try to use OBS instead. If you are just tuning in, because of course now I've gone up to 9 viewers. If you're just tuning in, please come back in a couple of minutes when I reboot the stream.